Good afternoon, everybody. It's interesting they've asked somebody from a country that's interested in devolution to talk about the whole of Europe, but I'll try and be inclusive. We are relatively big producers, 27 countries in the European Union. We've just listed there the sort of major producers, but there is pretty much beef production in all of the countries. And as other speakers have indicated, all of these numbers are going to be on the website, so we won't dwell on them too much. But unlike some of the previous discussions, we have a fairly diverse set of beef production systems because across Europe there are a mixture of different land types suitable for different production systems. And very broadly speaking, we can go from extensive grassland systems through to those that are dependent on dairy byproduct calves, down to the sort of Mediterranean systems, which are, again, sort of on extensive grazing pastures. So there's a very complex patchwork of different systems of production. So it is quite hard to summarize all of it in one go and just say, you know, this is European beef production. So I've tried to draw out the sort of common themes that are happening across the different countries in our approach to the issues of sustainability. We are net, as EU, we are net importers of beef. We do also export to some countries, and there is a lot of intra-country trade within the European Union. So this is a very sort of broad brush approach to the kind of trade that goes on. But South American imports to the EU are the most significant. But for example, the UK, which obviously I know most about, is around about 65% self-sufficient in beef production, and our biggest import comes from the Irish Republic. So that doesn't really show up in these figures. It's within EU trade. Now, the EU as a whole, and at the highest level of EU government, is taking sustainability seriously. So the EU 15, as it was then, had an agreement within the Kyoto Protocol to have an 8% reduction between 1990 and 2010, and have gone some way to achieving that. The status at the moment there is about 6.9% reduction achieved, and a lot of that is due to the reduction in animal numbers rather than any great leap in efficiency, which is progressing, but at the same sort of steady rate that it has done before. The EU are discussing at the moment more ambitious targets to take us beyond 2020. And indeed, there is across all industries, not just agriculture, some very ambitious targets that take us up to 2050. Again, at a European level, we have this SAI platform, which is a group working with major European food companies, really, rather than meat processors, who are looking at a working group on sustainable beef production. So as well as the government side, we do have industry activity trying to develop initiatives to improve the sustainability of beef production. And that just really summarizes where the CO2 equivalent costs across agriculture are in Europe. And as I said, a lot of that is due to reduction in livestock numbers as a whole. To reflect that sort of patchwork of production systems, there's also quite a patchwork of initiatives, and I've just listed a few on the next couple of slides of different countries and their activities. In the UK, we have my organisation, eBlex, has put together a roadmap to try and bring together all the different components that we've been hearing about in production systems. So that's looking at resource use, trying to understand how beef production systems work and where the opportunities are to improve efficiencies. I said we were devoluted. That's a new verb for anybody who's not heard that. So we do have Welsh and Scottish versions as well, and they're just sort of Celtic fringe activities around the English stuff. I put that in for my colleagues who I know are here. There are some combining activities across the whole of the UK, and there is this Greenhouse Gas Action Plan, which is between our sort of farming unions and government, a way of trying to bring together all of the activities about reducing CO2 equivalent cost of production. And that does go across all of agriculture, not just beef production, but it is a recognised sort of government industry activity to try and understand where the opportunities are to improve. In the Irish Republic, there are a variety of working groups, but I just feature that one, this climate change working group, which was established in 2009, and that's really trying to do the same sort of thing as the Greenhouse Gas Action Plan and bring together all the different strands of activity into some sort of coherent argument. Oh, that's a picture of the roadmap. I do have copies available if anybody wants one, but only about 6 because they were too heavy to carry. Across continental Europe, there are a number of activities, but it isn't terribly beef-focused, and that rather reflects the agricultural systems in these countries. The Netherlands, for example, big milk producers do produce a fair amount of beef, but don't have a sort of specific set of policies around beef production. But they have this voluntary plan called Clean and Economical, which is trying to bring together research activity into, again, a coherent argument about how to reduce greenhouse gas costs of production. In France, there are 2 major activities. Interbev have put together a sort of consumer-facing website to try and explain the position of beef production and in environmental concerns, and that seems to be going pretty well. And they also have a farmer-orientated activity, which is more like our assurance schemes, to try and include an environmental strand to that to try and sort of adapt farmer behaviour. Now, I think this is going on in many countries, but I've referred to some UK data just to illustrate what we've been doing. And one of the strands of activity that seems to be gaining quite a lot of ground is to try and understand the production footprints of different beef systems. We've done it as EBLEX, some other of the levy organisations are doing it, and I should also say there's a lot of company activity in the market from supply chains also trying to work in this area. So we, in our work, looked at 4 different systems there and have got a carbon footprint. As other speakers have said, there's no sort of right or wrong position, but by analysing these different systems separately, what we try and do is understand where the opportunities are to improve. And you can see along the bottom line there is a big range between best and worst performers. I'll use those terms sort of loosely. So that does mean we know within a system there's lots of opportunity to improve. And one of our challenges within EBLEX is to try and get to, as one of the earlier on speakers said, to get to the sort of worst producers to try and bring them up, because we can make most progress by working with them. Just one example, across the UK, McDonald's have surveyed around 300 beef suppliers in their supply chain and come up with very similar figures to our independent sample, which was much smaller. So just confirming, we used the same Kite consulting model, the ECO2 model, but it was a good comfort that we came up with similar sorts of figures from these separate surveys. So one of our challenges is to try and make this relevant to our farmer levy payers, our clientele, if you like. So what we've starting to do now in our conversation with our farmers is link the carbon cost of production with the economic performance. And from the sample of farms that we did, we could do that, and we've plotted margin there against CO2 equivalent cost per kilo. That is one of the most sort of potent ways to get to our farmers, is to explain to them that improving their economic situation is going to have a spin-off in terms of their carbon cost of production. What we've noticed over the last 2 or 3 years is that our farmers have become much more aware of the arguments. I think if we'd had a discussion like we're trying to have here in the UK 5 years ago, we would have been met largely by indifference from the farming audience. But now, if we talk about this, as we have done in recent meetings, we get a lot of well-informed opinions, and some less well-informed, but at least they're willing to enter into the debate. Another strand of our activity has been to try and look at consumer attitudes. So we are trying to join up the whole supply chain here and look at consumer attitudes. And we have a very extensive survey that we've been doing quarterly, and I just pick out for the brevity one of the more significant questions, but there's 30 or 40 questions we ask consumers. And this one was, has the climate change debate influenced the way that you purchase meat? And we can see there that really there's only about 15% who would agree or strongly agree that the climate change debate has influenced their meat purchasing. We can see that's grown a bit, and we expect that to grow. And if we went back in surveys further back, we'd see it was even smaller. So amongst consumers, the awareness is growing. I think that gives us some concern in that we need to get our argument better established and understand what it is we're trying to tell the consumers, but it also means we're not too late. We can engage with the vast majority there, the 85%, as a bit of a blank canvas, who are ready to try and understand this from a sort of position of ignorance, really, rather than already having an opinion formed. So when we asked sort of a really blank question to consumers in the street about what contributions society can make to combat global warming, and so this hadn't introduced any other sort of meat-relevant arguments, we can see there in this bottom corner that actually, unprompted, eating less meat was only 3% of the respondents came up with that supply. They were much more worried about other areas. So again, it just reinforces the fact that that sort of awareness is relatively low at the moment. So we have an opportunity to influence that debate. So the sort of conclusions that we're drawing about what's important is that, you know, we've touched on it already, there are lots of complexities in the food supply chain, and optimizing resource use, managing biodiversity and landscape value, and being sensible about our water use are all very important issues. One of the things we're working on very hard now is to get a better description of our industry, and we've done that with some of our farmer studies, both individual farmers and life cycle analysis work, to try and understand where we can improve the farmer situation. We need to better look at the opportunities there. As is rightly pointed out by our Brazilian colleagues, you know, we've done all our land use change a few thousand years ago, so it's pretty stable at the moment. Although we still do have issues about whether or not ploughing up pasture releases too much carbon, and how the arable cropping versus livestock use balance should fit. We're trying to emphasise the argument about economic performance and CO2 costs of production. There is a debate beginning to start, and organisations like World Wildlife Fund and other lobbying groups, if you like, are sort of bringing this to the surface about consumption footprint as an important part of the overall argument. As EBLEX, we don't really have a remit to have a view in that area, but it is part of the overall discussion that needs to be taken into concern. And then just finally reinforce the point that consumers are aware of the issues, but at the moment, certainly in the UK context, it's not really affecting purchasing behaviour, only in a very limited way. So thank you.